So welcome back to Room 101, and the football is back, well, for us Celtic fans anyway, as my guest and his team have been hitting it hard for the last couple of weeks now. So I am absolutely delighted to welcome for his Room 101 debut, co-host of the ABZ Football Podcast and huge Aberdeen fan, Gary Scott. Well, Gary, how are you doing, pal?
I'm good, Scott. Thanks for having us. How are you?
No, I'm delicate, but I'm doing okay, mate. I'm doing okay. Sweating. Right, so tradition rules that the guests tell us about themselves. Who is Gary Scott? How did you get into podcasting? And more importantly, why do you support Aberdeen?
Okay, Gary Scott. Who is Gary Scott? That's a question, isn't it? I wasn't expecting to go quite so deep and philosophical this early. Listen, born and bred Aberdeen. Lived here all my life, went to university here. I've ended up working here for the whole of my life as well. Married to a Glaswegian, so that'll get me kicked out of the city soon enough. In-laws are all Celtic fans as well, actually. So
right, okay.
Although I do think I am converting one of them, so I'm getting there. Why podcasting? Well, myself, my brother, and one of our other, there's a group of four of us who are kind of typical season ticket holders, have been for like 30 years, basically. And during the kind of second lockdown, I think it was, we were just like, we need to do something that's not Zoom quizzes anymore to try and keep in contact with each other. And I remember us just listening to a few of the Aberdeen podcasts that were out at the time and just thinking, you know what, why don't we do that? That could be fun. It means it'll force us to have to talk to each other every week, if nothing else, and then we'll see how it goes. And so the idea kind of germinated during that second lockdown. By the time we decided we weren't going to do it unless we could make it a decent quality product, okay. You know. Mm-hmm. So I hate listening to podcasts that sound like they've been recorded on a mobile phone in somebody's toilet. There's no excuse for it anymore, basically, is my view. We're fortunate my brother has got a degree, qualifications in music production, music recording and stuff like that. So we kind of made a really conscious effort. We'd invest in some not expensive kit, but some decent kit, microphones, etc. Gav's all set up with Pro Tools and all that fancy stuff from a editing perspective. He spends the majority of his time editing stuff. It's Gav that deserves all the credit for how the show sounds and how well it comes together, etc. Started off, we took a lot of time to get going. Started at the start of last season, and we all got very, very excited in those opening first couple of weeks, and then the season just gradually tailed off from that point on. But we decided we'd keep on going. And we're still here. So I think we're on episode 54, 55 this week. So we've done one a week consistently, and we'll keep doing that whole.
Outstanding. Well, to give you some vindication, I've listened to a couple of your pods, and as you say, very, very nicely done. The sound's excellent and stuff like that. So definitely a thumbs up for me anyway.
Thank you.
Right. So again, we haven't spoken to an Aberdeen in a good wee while. And since we're at the start of the new season, we'll look back at last season. And we'll rattle through it.
We'll have to.
We won't labour on it. Well, it gives us a good base. It gives us a good base, right? So the 2021 season, as we can remember, we were still laid low by COVID somewhat. However, we still had we actually had restricted crowds rather than none. And it was somewhat of an overhaul at Aberdeen at that point. Stephen Glass had went into his first pre-season after replacing Derek McInnes the previous March. He had already pinpointed Celtic captain Scott Brown as his player assistant manager, and he eventually joined up after Celtic contract had ended. The league season started pretty well enough. 2 wins over Dundee United and Livingston, giving great hope, I would guess. However, a League Cup defeat away to Wraith Rovers was matched by a Euro exit to Karabag in the Conference League playoff. The Dons had disposed of Swedish side BK Häcken and Icelandic side Breiðablik in the previous 2 rounds. So let's get into that initially, right? Without over-labouring it, the McInnes thing, to go back to that far, what was your thinking there?
Oh, cans. Worms everywhere. You've asked us to go back and open on this whole thing again. Right. So for me, my perspective only, I think I probably speak for the other 2 boys on the podcast as well with this. I think we're all agreement. Derek McInnes was a good manager for Aberdeen Football Club in his time here. He did a solid job for Aberdeen. There's definitely an argument to suggest that we should have had more trophies in the cabinet during his period. He did land lucky that this was the period of time that a certain club went bust and we're no longer in the top flight, we also were missing the likes of Hearts, Hibs for periods of time as well, because they were dilly-dallying around the Championship,
yeah.
as they have a tendency to do. So and there were opportunities. I look at the Celtic Ronnie Deila side, in particular. That season is one I think a lot of Aberdeen fans look and go, for any team in recent history to have had a shot at winning the league, that was the one. And I just don't think we had the belief that we could do it. And Celtic eventually kind of pulled away from us in that one. Derek did a good job at Aberdeen, but his time was up. His time was up probably, if I'm being brutally honest, I think his time was up 18 months, 2 seasons before he actually finally left. The football was becoming extremely stale. He had one way of playing. The signings were becoming horrendous on a pretty frequent basis. We were still grinding at results, but we were not a particularly attractive football team to watch. And I guess this is where you get to, and on the podcast we have this, like Graham, who's much more pragmatic. He's always saying, I don't really care how we play. Right. That's what win games. And that's fine. But even Graham was getting to the point of like, I'm kind of a bit fed up coming to watch us play, I don't know, like Livingston or Kilmarnock and grinding out a 1-0 win at home and being like, okay, well, that was fine. But there was nothing there to encourage you to keep turning up week on week. So the writing had been on the wall for McInnes for, like I say, I would say at least 2 seasons prior to when he departed.
Okay.
I think there's still this weird thing with the Aberdeen support about Derek McInnes. Some people still hold him in this like godlike status. And I think you can get heavily criticised for saying things like Derek McInnes did an okay job with Aberdeen, because the way I approach it is that if you look at budgets, and budgets in the main dictate where you finish in the league more often than not. When you look at a budgetary perspective, he performed to where he should have done in most of the seasons he was at Aberdeen. On a couple of occasions, he outperformed that. On a few occasions, he fell below that standard. He did a good job. It's hard though. I think the problem as well is Aberdeen fans, if you're a certain age and you have grown up through, the Eb Scovdale era and the Steve Patterson era, and then you got a little bit of an inkling of maybe some good stuff with Jimmy Calder. Then you went to Mark Mcgee and Craig Brown and all that. McInnes seemed like a god because we suddenly won a league and we looked competitive all again. We won a League Cup and we looked competitive again. But if you step back from it a little bit and you go, you know what, in reality, we should have done a little bit more than what we actually did in that era, given the opportunities that were available to us. It was the right time for him to go. That's a very long way for me to get to that point.
No, that's bang on. I always think football fans, we think our opinion matters when it comes to telling other guys what they should think about their team. And I was always somebody who thought Derek McInnes was doing a decent job, because every year you were losing your best player, and for him to kind of continuously keep. But the points you make are mega valid. I mean, I can go back to my own time with Gordon Strachan. Celtic were winning. It was turgid. It was absolutely turgid. And the day he left, I was like, happy days, do you know what I mean?
There's definitely a huge argument about him losing players. I think that's very valid, absolutely. But then you get to the question of, he was then given money to try and build a team again, and the money he spent, he didn't spend it wisely. I mean,
it's very interesting because it kind of correlates with what's happened this summer, doesn't it? Because this is the exact same pattern. But we'll come to that. Right, so Stephen Glass, again, without really wanting to go mental on it, Stephen Glass comes in. It seemed a kind of a strange one. We understand the background because of the connections to the American thing, but he wasn't Atlanta United's first manager. It was like B team, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he'd had like a couple of games in interim charge of the first team at Atlanta when Frank de Boer got sacked. In fact, he had about maybe 12 games, I think, in charge of Atlanta United's A team.
Right, okay.
But they never decided to give him the full-time job, which I think now in retrospect maybe says a lot.
A wee bit of hindsight there. I mean, it seemed, I like out of the box thinking, especially if somebody knows something we don't. I mean, God, look at Ange Postecoglou. Geez, I mean, that's a perfect. And rather than going back to you'd be old enough to remember when Jim Jeffries was just getting a job every time one come up, and you were like, for fuck's sake, I mean. But so just your thoughts in general. Were you all into it? Would this give the guy a chance?
Of course. I mean, at the end of the day, whoever gets the job has to be given, the backing. You have to, even if you're not a fan of who it is, you're going to give them the backing to begin with. I was cautiously okay with it when it happened. I didn't like the way that the club tried to pretend that they'd gone through this big, huge, thorough selection process and interview process, and we'd arrived at Stephen Glass as the standout candidate, the outstanding candidate is how he was termed at the time. I think if we'd been much more open and just said, look, we've got this link up with Atlanta United. Stephen's been going through the kind of coaching program there. He's been the B team coach. He's had experience at the top level. We've reached an agreement at Atlanta that it's in Stephen's best developmental interest. We think it's a good opportunity. If they'd done it that way, I think more people would have gone, I'm still not sure, but I can see the logic behind this. And listen, like for me, again, show my age now. Like Stephen Glass was, I love Stephen Glass as a footballer. For me, Stephen was the second incarnation of Ian Jess as far as my teenage mind was concerned. So Ian Jess, hands down, is my favourite Aberdeen player of all time, unquestionably.
Fair dues.
By this point, he departed, or Stephen Glass started to come into the Aberdeen team as Jess was starting to exit to go to Coventry City. So it kind of felt like this natural conveyor belt of another player come in who had a very similar set of attributes to what Ian had. I loved Stephen as a player. I thought when he came in as manager, I thought he talked very well about how he wanted to play the game. I thought his ideas seemed really sound. I think the fact that he was able to convince Scott Brown to jack in a job for life at Celtic and move to Aberdeen showed a lot about his ability to sell potentially a project to somebody. I know they're also very close from their time at Hibs together, but still, Brown he'd been a Celtic until he died if he wanted to be. Let's face it. So I was very optimistic about it. The way he described how he wanted football to be played was exciting and interesting to a lot of us. It was almost very similar to the way that Postecoglou was talking about how he wanted his Celtic team to play. Stephen Glass referenced Tata Marino, who was the coach at Atlanta United when they won the MLS in their kind of debut season or second season. He'd worked under him. If you look at his history, top coach, plays football in a very expansive manner. You're thinking, okay, this could be really good. And I'm the same as you. I want outsiders to come into Scottish football and do well, because I'm so fed up of just being the same old faces all the time on the merry-go-round. And I really wanted somebody to come in and shake it up and show to the rest of the league as well that you can pick guys from outside. It might not always work, but some guys who come up with different ideas, thinking outside the box, if they're a success, then why would you not do it? And it just didn't work.
I'm laughing at your reaction rather than laughing at your just to say there, I'm not sitting here laughing at.
We've undergone 52 weeks of therapy on this, so we're now all smiling about it. It's happened. We didn't get relegated. It's all right.
It's funny because the season previous to last season, obviously we were doing our podcast every week, and it was like different ways to lose. Do you know what I mean? You're like, fucking, what's going on? But alas, that's by and by. Right, so the season started well, and as I do these shows, I speak to them as like opposition fans. So I was watching a load of games, and I watched your games, and Aberdeen's league games showed Aberdeen having lots and lots of the ball and not scoring. And that was basically what they had, loads and loads of the ball, and they looked like this great team, but they just couldn't stick the ball in the net. And none more so than the Karabag game. I mean, obviously, I'll pique people's memory by saying the Karabag game, I'm sure you could beat 1-0 the first game on the worst pitch I have ever seen in my entire life. And
it puts Tattyfields to shame.
Yeah, and from that game, I was confident Aberdeen were going to win that tie. I was like, Aberdeen are definitely going to win that. And then to get beat 3-1, I'll be honest, I didn't watch the second leg, but I remember being gutted, because I want, apart from them, I want every Scottish team to win. Every game, I want them to win. And it kind of kills me that we get to this point and it just happens every year, doesn't it?
I think what was funny about that was a lot of people went, oh, that pitch in Azerbaijan was terrible. Can't wait to get them home to our pitch because we'll really do them then. Yeah. And it was like, as it turned out, the better pitch was much more favourable to Karabag than it was to us. I mean, like, in fairness to Karabakh, they were excellent on the night. They were probably, in our last 8 seasons of European exploits, I would say them up with Real Sociedad are the best team we've played in Europe.
Jeez.
They were superb. Tactically, they just completely outthought us. We also didn't even seem to know how we were going. This was, for me, the start of where things started to go wrong last season. I mean, I'm saying that now in retrospect. When you go back and look at the games, the very first game of the season, the Conference League first round or whatever it was, against Häcken at Pataudry, we were 1-5-1. Everyone comes out of that being like, holy shit, we are going to win the lot. We are flying. Because Häcken are not a bad side. Häcken are an okay side.
Mm-hmm.
And the away leg, we were really poor. Like, we were 2-0 down and we were getting...
That's right, yeah.
Like, arses were twitching big time. And one of their players got stupidly sent off for reacting to something that happened. If he hadn't got sent off, I'm not actually entirely convinced we come through that tie. I could have seen Häcken scoring another 2 goals there and us going out 4-0, 5-5 on away goals. I'm not joking. Breidablik away, we went 2-0 up really quickly. You think, happy days, we're through here. Breidablik got back to 2-2. We looked a bit ropey. We managed to grab a third. Fine. The home leg again, Breidablik kind of exploited us a bit on the fullback areas, which was an area that really we suffered with last season. So there was already kind of like warning signs floating around about our defensive capabilities last season, even this early in the campaign. And then Karabakh just did an absolute number on us at Pataudry. Like, I think we'd got ourselves worked up into this idea of, right, let's show them a real typical Scottish atmosphere and we'll just get right after them from the word go. And I think we flew in a few tackles, and then I can't remember the numbers. I'll need to go back and look at it. But I think they score within about 6 or 7 minutes, and the game's just done. And then they score another like 10 minutes later, and it's like the game's over at that point.
So, one of the ones.
So, and that fell in the middle of, I think at that point, I can't remember the exact timelines, but I think we played Wraith Rovers. We got knocked out of the League Cup by Wraith on Sunday. We played Karabakh away on the Thursday. Played Hearts, got a 1-1 draw at Hearts, which was a good result actually. We played okay that day. And then played Karabakh, and then it just...
Yeah, well, that's it. So to confirm what you're saying, the league form massively dipped after the disappointments. 2 draws with Hearts, like you say. The Hearts one was a good one because Hearts were flying at that time.
Hearts were pitched last season. I hate this. I hate this argument about Hearts being well. Hearts were murder. We honestly, we played Hearts. Hearts, Celtic and Rangers were probably the teams we played best against last season.
Yeah, right. Well, I can. In fact, I did watch these against each of them. So I'd agree with you.
I hate this narrative that Hearts were great last season. They were pish. Honestly,
well, you've got to say, for a team that came up for the championship to comfortably finish third, I think you're doing them a disservice.
It's just because the rest of the league was murder. Right, the rest of the league just went, well, there you go. Here's third place, boys. On you go. Like, we're not even going to put a glove on you.
Right, so you had the draw with Hearts, and then you had the draw with Ross County, and then you had a 5-match losing streak, which included that was a 2-1 defeat to Celtic on the 3rd of October. Now, I appreciate it. It was a good long while ago, but what can you remember that game? To remind people, that was a game where Kyogo had opened the score early doors. Lewis Ferguson had scored the header that just kind of right at the post, and only for Jota to win the game late on. Like I say, I appreciate it was a long time ago, but what was your memory of that game? Because I thought, again, you're in the middle of this losing streak, but from what I'd watched at Aberdeen, I had enough in my knowledge to think this is going to be a tough game, and I thought it was a tough game, and I was delighted. I mean, it was a huge game for us because it was your first away win.
Yeah, and you went unbeaten from this point, didn't you?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, for me, it was a great opportunity for us to try and get like our season back on track. It's that classic Celtic arrive, still try to gel, still try to get new players like merging together, finding a way of playing. Like you say, you haven't won a away game since like February or something at that point, I think it was. And you think, right, it's a bit of a free hit as well from us from that perspective. So you're like, right, go, have a go at them and see what we can do. First half in particular, it was a really odd game. We got our pressing all wrong in the first half. It looked like we'd never actually worked on how to press as a team. before in our lives. And it was really odd because I remember you guys were dicking about with the ball at the back, like nobody's business. Like there was a point where like Carter Vickers, I think Starfelt played that day, and Joe Hart. Honestly, they were playing like triangle passes to each other on like the 6-yard box. And we nearly caught you out about 3 or 4 times. And it was like, keep doing it. We're going to get in here if we keep doing this. And then we suddenly decided, we'll just let you guys do it. And the press in the first half was weird. We decided to drop Joe Lewis for this game and put Gary Woods in goals.
Yeah.
He's a horrendous goalkeeper. And that was plain and simple within about 10 minutes of the game kicking off. The first goal, as I recall, was this one where Hyogo just comes in and chests it in from about 2 yards out.
Yes, that's the very one, yep.
Just like sums up our season. We go in though at half time and you think, okay, get in, reorganise. We get a goal quite sharp, I think, second half. Adam Montgomery does his best white men can't jump impression on the post for the Ferguson header. And you think, okay, here we go. And I thought at that point we looked all right. I thought we looked dangerous. I thought we had a couple of, we didn't have any clear-cut chances, I don't think, but we had a couple of snap efforts from like Austin Samuels and stuff. And then in very typical Aberdeen fashion, sit back, and eventually the inevitable happens. Although this time it came from Adam Montgomery down the left-hand side, which is the most impressive thing that Adam Montgomery did at Pittodrie all season.
I was wondering how you were going to get that. I like that. But I'm looking at the stats here. I mean, Celtic had 61% possession, right? Which Aberdeen had 11 shots to our 7. You had 5 shots in target to our 2.
I mean, we were playing with like 10 men as well because Matty Longstaff played for 90 minutes for us that day. And he was fucking horrendous.
But it wasn't his fault. Scottish football was rubbish.
It's all Scottish football's fault. Yeah, it was too bad for Matty.
It was too bad that he couldn't be good in it.
Yeah. So like, it was a weird performance, that one. We felt, I think a lot of people came out of that game feeling strangely, all right, well that was better, but we've still lost, and we went to Dundee the following week, with this real kind of. We're like 6, I think that was 6 defeats on the spin, but it was, apart from being 6 defeats on the spin, I think it made it like 9 or 10 without a win.
That's right, including the 2 draws, yeah.
And then went to Dundee, who at the time were bottom of the table, hadn't won a game, I don't think, at that point. And we allowed Charlie Adam just to run the show. And the other thing I would say as well about that Celtic game at home, that was the first time we saw Scott Brown's infamous Celtic cramps that he seemed to get.
Right, okay. As I remember, I thought Scott Brown had a decent game for you games, but I can see. Aye.
He might have done, but he just seemed to always get a cramp issue every time we played you boys. I don't know why that was.
Well, that's funny because I talked to the Dundee United boys and they always go about Charlie Mulgrew's mysterious injuries when he plays against us. He always seems to miss.
Don't get us started about Charlie Mcgee, honestly.
He scored a free kick against us for you, did he know?
He very well might have done. I don't know.
Right,
I try to blank Charlie Mcgee out my mind.
Talking about free kicks, you're talking about that Dundee game. Now, Lee Griffiths was at Dundee at this point and scored a worldie. That was the only thing he done like that season.
I saw Aberdeen fans blaming Joe Lewis for this. This was the Boxing Day game that was played behind closed doors again, or like behind like 300 people. Because remember, the whole COVID thing happened all over again and we got shut out of the games again. And I remember sitting watching this. I was actually at the in-laws in the Glasgow area for Christmas. And I remember watching it and seeing the goal go in, and you're like, well, that's a hit, isn't it? And then Aberdeen Twitter's like, oh, Joel should do better there. And it's like, what game are you watching? Like, seriously. It's just, Aberdeen Twitter's an interesting place at the best of times, put it that way.
We've seen what Celtic Twitter's like this weather, so fucking hell. Right, so we'll fire through this then, right? So the run came to an end with a good 1-0 win over Hibs, followed by an eventful 2-2 game at Ibrox.
Yes.
And then there was another a good 2-1 win over Hearts. But
because they're murder.
Consistency was a killer. Another 3-match losing streak, again, including a 2-1 defeat to Celtic at Celtic Park. This time, Jota and Ferguson both scoring again, but Carl McGregor scored the winner.
Off his arse after a clearance from Johnny Hayes.
Yeah. There's pure wee Johnny helping us out again.
You know when your luck's out, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, how has that happened, honestly?
Right, so Once again, the team bounced back. 3 wins on the spin, but after Aberdeen beat Dundee 2-1 on the 26th of December, as we just spoke about, the wheels really came off as the team wouldn't win another league game until the 19th of March. Another narrow defeat to Celtic, this time a 3-2 loss at Pittodrie with some controversy for the winning goal. And the Scottish Cup, you disposed of Edinburgh City, easy enough, but a 2-1 defeat to Motherwell, so you exit the tournament at the 5th round stage, and 2 days later, it was finished for Stephen Glass as he was sacked by the... Quite a bit there, but again, we'll try and kind of get through this. At that point, Stephen Glass has to go yourself.
I think I was probably just on the precipice. Right. There was a bit of me was still like, you need to give the guy some time. Mm-hmm. And there's some mitigating circumstances about this, and this is really boring chat for anyone who's not an Aberdeen fan, so I apologise right now for this. But I have an element of a degree of sympathy for Stephen Glass about how his appointment happened and the way that certain things should have been in place for him coming in the door that weren't in place. So when we decided to empty Derek McInnes, Aberdeen decided we would adopt a much more modern approach to our footballing department. So like Derek McInnes had been historically, an old school Fergie manager, just ran everything. Once he departed, we decided, in fact, we're going to put in place a director of football, there'll be a head coach, and there'll now be a head of recruitment who will be responsible for all the recruitment activity, working in tandem with the manager up to the director of football. Interesting. Makes perfect sense. It's how most modern football clubs operate. Ideal. Well on board with that. Now, the slight problem with what Aberdeen did is that we appointed the head coach first, then we appointed the director of football, and then our head of recruitment didn't arrive until September.
Right.
So you then ended up a situation where, and Dave Cormack, our esteemed chairman, came out at the time when Stephen Glass was appointed and said that they ruled out, again, this is, you have to take this with a massive pinch of salt because this presupposes that there were actually interviews taking place. He said something along the lines of like 80% of candidates who were at interview stage wanted full control over the transfer policy. And that didn't jive with our new setup. So they were basically discounted. Mm-hmm. So then you're going, all right, well, fair enough. That's a logical thing to have done. But then if the manager who comes into the hot seat has been told, listen, you're not going to be responsible for transfers now, then he's probably got an expectation correctly that when he gets in the door, that supporting structure should be there around him. As it turns out, that wasn't there. So Stephen Glass was the guy put in charge then of dealing with recruitment in last summer's transfer window, alongside, I imagine, Stephen Gunn, who became our director of football. Like I say, our head of recruitment didn't come in the door until September. Our previous recruitment manager, whatever, departed at the same time as Derek McInnes did. That wouldn't have been a particularly detailed recruitment plan. I'll be very polite about that. So instantly, Stephen Glass is at a bit of a kind of disadvantage, I think, because he's been told he's not doing recruitment. But now he's being asked to do the recruitment. And the squad he was left from Derek McInnes was a mess. We had one first-team striker, I think, on the books when McInnes left. That was Bruce Anderson. Right. Bruce decided then he didn't want to sign a new deal at Aberdeen because he couldn't see how he was going to get chances. So he went to Livingston eventually. Yep. Potentially as a make-weight for Jet. Fucking hell, we won't talk about him again. And our entire summer window now, when you look back on it now, it's horrendous. There's only 3. I can't remember. You might have the numbers in front of you just now. I don't know how many players we signed last season in the summer. There's only 3 of them left at the club, and there's a very good chance that 2 out of those 3 won't be here come the end of this summer transfer window. Potentially 3 out of those 3. So that says everything.
We're basically saying that Ramirez and Beswin are kind of the two.
Well, Bejouin was a January signing. So you've got Ramirez, David Bates, and Marley Watkins, the 3 who were signed in last summer's window, who are still here. But David Bates is warm on the bench and doesn't look like he's going to get anywhere near the first team. And there was chat last week he might be away to Ipswich.
I actually saw that, yeah.
Marley Watkins is kind of a bit part player at the moment. I'm not really sure where he fits in Goodwin's plans. And then Ramirez, we could do an entire episode about the Christian Ramirez saga. so let's not go there. But I'll be surprised if Ramirez is still here come the summer, end of the summer window. So
really, well, that's interesting. We'll come to him when we start talking about the squad, because I do want to talk about him.
right.
Right. So where did we get to? So yeah, as I said, Stephen Glass is away. Barry Robson's come in as caretaker until the club appointed St Mirren manager Jim Goodwin as permanent boss. Goodwin certainly put his stamp on the club early enough. Scott Brown was released for his role at the club in early March. In April, Michael Devlin and J. Emmanuel Thomas were released after rejecting a contract that was announced that Andrew Constantine would end his tenure at the club at the end of the season. Now, the 35-year-old had come through the ranks, and despite his age, for us outside Aberdeen, that was quite a shock announcement, to be honest. A bottom six finished, only 1-1 more, well, a 1-0 win over Dundee, so Aberdeen finished the season in 10th place, 3 points off St Mirren in 9th, and 6 points off the Premiership relegation playoff in St Johnstone in 11th. The Dons finished with 10 wins, 11 draws, 17 losses, 41 goals scored, 46 conceded, racking up 41 points on the way. So I'm going to summarise by saying quite a disappointing season.
That's been really polite. Very polite. Horrendous. One of the worst seasons of all time from an Aberdeen perspective.
Wow, yeah. Wow. And geez, that's saying something. I suppose in relative terms it would be a really bad season.
I mean, there's arguments in there about how bad that was compared to, like, even the Mark Mcgee era was horrendous for us. There's an argument to be made that some of that last season was worse. It was, honestly, that run in towards the back end of the season, you're saying there we finished 6 points clear, I think, of the relegation playoff place. If the league had gone for another couple of seasons, another couple of weeks, I'm not convinced we wouldn't have ended up in that second bottom spot. And if that had happened with the way our squad was at that moment in time, like you touched on it, Goodwin kind of came in and made his own mark on things. Not entirely sure the way he went about it to begin with was the best way to do it. I think he did a very interesting interview when he first signed, not when he first signed it, at the back end of the season, sorry, where he talked about how he thought he was dealing with grown-ups and he thought he was dealing with grown men. And so he was telling certain guys, look, you're not in my plans for next season, so you're not going to have a contract here. And I think he seemed to think that like guys would really appreciate that. And maybe some people did, but it seemed to me that most other people just went, well, fine, well, fuck you then.
I'm all fine.
And just completely down tools. And like, you know, when you're like, I don't fancy if we'd got to that point, we would have had the fight and the design in the squad to get us out of that at all, if we'd have ended up in that place. We got very, very fortunate that we had the points on the board already. That's all I'll say about that. It's horrendous.
But that's kind of similar to, do you remember when David Martindale came into Livingston and and they had that 14 match unbeaten run, but then like they won like one game for the remainder of the season, and it still kept them in the top end of the league. So as you say, glad you've got to get. So this summer, again, a massive amount of shake-up. Jim Goodwin, as we just spoke about, he's already put a stamp on the team and he continued in the summer in quite a manner. Young squad members Mark Gallagher, Michael Ruth, Jamie Schringer, Tyler Makita, sorry, my apologies, Tyler. Luke Turner, Jack McIver, and Finn Yates were all released. Scottish internationalist Declan Gallagher had his contract terminated and subsequently joined St Mirren. There's another one I want to talk about. 30-year-old Belgian winger Funzu Ojo saw out his contract and was released, as did former Scottish Cup winning midfielder Dylan Mcgee. Considine left and joined St Johnstone, and experienced goalkeeper Gary Woods was released also. In the middle of June, 19-year-old fullback Calvin Ramsey joined Liverpool for a reported 4.2 million with a few add-ons and a sell-on fee. And then on the 12th of July, of all days, Lewis Ferguson departed the club for Serie A in Bologna for a fee around £2 million. Young players Dean Campbell, Kevin Hanratty and Evan Towler all left for season-long loans to Stevenage Borough, Forth Athletic and Cove Rangers respectively. So let's talk about the outgoings first, right? There's a good few to talk about there, right? So you seem delighted that Declan Gallagher left. Now, I thought that was an amazing signing last summer. So how did it go so badly wrong?
I don't know who decided to sign Declan Gallagher. This is my biggest question about this, is because if we were going to try and play this all-encompassing, free-flowing football from the back, Declan Gallagher ain't a guy to play that with.
Yeah,
you know,
that makes sense. Yep.
So it's one of these where you go, why are we signing players who can't play the way you want to play? That makes no sense at all. I think a lot of us, I mean, I was kind of bemused by the Declan Gallagher signing anyway to begin with, because I've always thought that Gallagher looks, whenever I've watched Gallagher, I've always thought he looks okay as an old school centre half who will just kick things and head things. And that's all he's going to do. And I'm like, that's also fine if that's what you need. But I've also thought in his time watching him with Livy, Motherwell, and then I guess with Scotland especially, he seems to have done his best work playing in a 3. We never play with 3s because we always fuck it up. Like, I've never seen Aberdeen successfully play with a 3 at the back in my entire time. It doesn't matter who the players are. It's like, it's just a system that we should just be like, just no, not for us. Don't do it. Although in saying that, actually, we tried 3 at the back a couple of times last season and we looked all right. And that's hilariously when Declan Gallagher looked semi-competent is when we played that way. I don't know who decided to sign Derek McInnes. I think it was a very odd choice. There's some rumours that it was actually Derek McInnes signing, had already been agreed in January.
Right, okay.
And it only got announced towards the back end. That, to me, would make sense. It feels like a Derek McInnes signing.
As I remember, though, it was an early one, was it? No, I think you're bang on the button. As I remember, I think he signed him pre-contract. But
he signed a pre-contract, but it wasn't like March or anything like that. It was kind of towards the end. It was weird. It was after Glass came in, it was announced. But Graham Alexander did a podcast or did a segment on one of those low rent YouTube channels like PLZ or something. And he said about they got pissed off with Gallagher because they knew in the January he'd basically agreed to move somewhere already. And if that was Aberdeen, then that would tie back to the fact that was a Derek McInnes signing. And it's kind of where I think it was. It just didn't work for him. It just didn't work. I'm probably being slightly unfair on him by being so exuberant about him departing, but he was not very good. And then one of these classics again, he leaves and he comes out with the whole, oh, well, I'm clearly good enough to play for Aberdeen. It's like, well, you're clearly not, Declan, because you were fucking horseshit, mate, and you're now at St Mirren. So, you know, all the best to him in his future endeavours, but I'm glad he's not part of our centre defensive line any longer.
Well, this right. Tell me, Dylan Mcgee, as I seen it, I couldn't have told you where Dylan Mcgee's best position was when he was at Celtic. And then he went to Hibs and he had that great season. But it needs to be reminded that he had that great season in the First Division or the Championship. I mean, I appreciate they won the cup and stuff, but I thought he'd found a level. So when he went to Aberdeen, I was really interested to see if he would progress. I think injuries blighted him. However, at no point did I think he looks like an Aberdeen player.
I liked Dylan Mcgee. I think Dylan Mcgee has got a lot going for him in terms of his attributes. Dylan's biggest issue is keeping fit. I mean, he joined Aberdeen in January 2020.
Right.
2020? Is that right? I think so.
We'll go with that.
And I couldn't tell off the top of my head how many games he played for Aberdeen in that period of time. Not enough is going to be the truth. I think as well, he couldn't. I think when the likes of Scott Brown and stuff came in last season, his opportunities to really Mcgee struck me as actually being a very Stephen, for the type of football Stephen Glass wanted to play. Mcgee struck me as actually being a very a guy who would really fit that system really well. Can put his foot in the ball, has got a good range of passing, can move things quickly. And actually, when he came in, he actually did really well, I felt, last season in the centre of the park at doing that. I think that last season, part of the problem we had in the centre midfield under Stephen Glass was how slow and how ponderous we were in the middle of the park when we got the ball. And I felt Mcgee didn't really play that way. And I thought he did okay when he came in. Keeping him fit was the biggest challenge. I'm surprised he's not picked up a club yet.
Yeah. Okay.
I know he's still up in the Aberdeen area. So, which I was kind of also surprised. I assumed he'd moved back towards like the Central Belt somewhere, whether it was Glasgow or maybe Edinburgh or something. So whether that means there's maybe something in the works for him up this neck of the woods somewhere, you know, like Cove Rangers are obviously not shy about spending a few bob, or
Mhm.
maybe one of the Dundee clubs that would allow him to commute. I don't know. But yeah, I think it was a shame for Dylan Mcgee it didn't work out, but I think it was also the right thing for him to
Yeah.
depart, because he came in here on pretty big wages from Sunderland,
Mhm.
and we weren't getting a return on that, so it was the right thing to do.
Right, so we'll talk about the two big ones then. Calvin Ramsey was a boy who impressed straight away when he came into the team. I'll be honest and say I didn't keep my eyes on it. However, the fact he's went for that, obviously his potential is huge then. If Liverpool have decided that they're splashing that out. A no-brainer, isn't it? I mean, you don't like to lose your young guys, but if you're getting fairly recompensed for it, then it thumbs up, innit?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you look at that and you go, what is fair recompense for that? And I know a lot of people have looked at a right back who departed from a team in Glasgow for Liverpool as well. The other side in Liverpool, and who went for an order of magnitude higher than what Ramsey went to Liverpool for. And a lot of Aberdeen fans, I think, were like, well, if he goes for, well, it was reported as being 12 million, but who knows what that actually means in reality.
Exactly, yeah.
Unfortunately, for Aberdeen, for Hearts, for Hibs, for pretty much everybody outside of Rangers and Celtic in the Scottish Premier League, we just can't seem to attract that premium on our players to the same extent. There's a very valid argument to suggest that we should have got more for Ramsey based on how much Patterson went for. Patterson, has got international caps. Yeah, agreed. That's a tick in the box there. I agree in that perspective. But Ramsey's played much more football at first team level than Patterson has. So, do I think we would have got that sort of money? No, but could we have maybe got a little bit more, 6 or 7 million, for example? I think there's an argument to suggest that's the case. But at the same time, for a team like Aberdeen to get 4.5 million plus an additional 3 million in potential add-ons, for a guy who's only played, I think Calvin played 39 times for Aberdeen. I think it's roughly there. He played one season of first team football. It's it's a great piece of business. It's we talked about it at the time as well. There's so many different things in this discussion you have to look into. It's like, are you really going to turn around to a young player as well and say we're not going to accept an offer from Liverpool, who arguably, as much as it'll pain me to say it, arguably are one of the top sides in the world right now. We're not going to accept an offer from them because we think we could get our 2-3 million out of it for you at the age of, Calvin's just turned 19 now, I think. It's life-changing money for Calvin. He's got a 5-year contract at Liverpool. Even if he never makes a first team appearance at Liverpool, he's set up for life now. Comes from a really, really good family here in Aberdeen. But the important thing for us is it gives us now a really good story to tell from a youth academy perspective, for players 100%. Across not just Aberdeen or Aberdeenshire, but across the whole of Scotland, to say, look, you can come to Aberdeen, you can come to our youth setup. We will give you opportunities in the first team if we think you're good enough. And the best teams in the world are looking at us. If you come in and you do well enough, case in point, the best teams in the world are looking at the Scottish Premier League. They're looking at Aberdeen. Come and do a job. You never know where you could end up moving to. And it gives us a good selling point now to younger players we're bringing in from outside of Scotland now on just the transfer front. We can tell a similar story to these guys now as well. So from that perspective, it ticks so many different boxes from us. Obviously, hoping Calvin does exceptionally well down there and goes on to have a good career at Liverpool.
Good man. No, I agree with all that. I think the one thing that kills, it's good to see clubs in Scotland getting more dough. I agree with you. There's good players there, and you guys deserve to get paid fairly. I mean, they don't seem to have any problems buying Croatians for 15 and 20 million without them playing a game. What's the difference for guys like that? I do think the big point that goes against Calvin Ramsey is the European thing. I mean, one good run by you guys and Calvin Ramsey being the star of that run then allows you to kind of go, no, 10 million is a starting point. Because look at Rangers. Rangers are only now getting the big money for their players after that run.
It's an absolutely fair shout. And I think if you're being realistic, like I say, I think there was Aberdeen fans out there who were expecting 10 million or something for Ramsey. I think it's just not going to happen, unfortunately. I mean, you saw Liverpool were haggling with us for like $500,000, and you're like, it's like pennies for Liverpool. But that's unfortunately where we are at the moment in the football food chain. So we kind of have to deal with that. And
so let's look at the next guy then. $2 million for Lewis Ferguson, for a guy who, again, coming from looking at from down here, a vitally important player to the team. So to get $2 million seemed low. However, was his contract running out or something?
So he still had 2 years in his deal left to go.
Jeez.
The Lewis Ferguson thing's listen, Lewis Ferguson's been a really, really good player for Aberdeen Football Club. But at the same time, Aberdeen Football Club's been really, really good for Lewis Ferguson as well. And I sometimes think that gets lost in the conversation sometimes. Lewis clearly decided at the end of the season before last that he wanted to move on. He handed in a transfer request before last season started. That got rejected. We had one offer come in from, I think it was Watford at the time, for about 2 million there or thereabouts, and we rejected that at the time. And that was it. He was still with Aberdeen for the rest of the season. I know there was some interest from some other clubs in January, but nothing really concrete came from that. For Aberdeen, I think it became a point this summer of if we're going to make any sort of real return on Lewis Ferguson, we have to sell him this summer, because once he gets to January, he's then 18 months away from being out of contract. His value just starts diminishing rapidly as far as we're concerned to what we can possibly get in for him. So I personally, I feel 2 million's light. I mean, this goes back to this argument about Calvin Ramsey and international caps and not having international caps. Lewis Ferguson's got international caps for Scotland now. He's played, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's like 138 times for Aberdeen, 39 goals. He's been very, very consistent for Aberdeen. There's a massive argument there to say that Lewis Ferguson is worth. Liverpool have bought potential.
Yes.
Calvin Ramsey. Lewis Ferguson is much more of a finished product. Now, he still needs a lot of work done to him, but he's in a better place. But, and this is an argument that a lot of Aberdeen fans keep having as well, my view, and having spoken to a lot of guys who work in the transfer market industry, shall we say, a lot of them would say kind of what I feel about Lewis Ferguson, that he's a very good player, but he's not exceptional at anything.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So he's like, he's a 7 out of 10 in loads of different areas. He's not an 8 or a 9 out of 10 in areas. And so when scouts come to watch Aberdeen, they go, well, he's decent. He's not doing anything that really grabs my attention, though. And and if you strip penalties out of his statistics, his goal scoring for a kind of box to box midfielder could be better. He's good at set pieces, very good header of the ball, as it turns out. Listen, Lewis Ferguson's a good player. I just think that there's just something about him that just doesn't maybe quite attract scouts.
I suppose you can say, if you're scouting a player and you need this certain type of player, he's not going to grab you by the neck and kind of shake your head, is he? And I mean, no, you need to sign me, because there's an argument, I think, daily when it come up that Lewis Ferguson wanted to leave Aberdeen, and Celtic fans going, would you have him? Right? So you take away the obvious Derek Ferguson, Barry Ferguson thing, and you put that to the side, which a lot of people can't, obviously, but you're kind of thinking, right, would he benefit us? Is he better than him? Is he better than him? And it always seemed to come back, he'd be a good squad player who maybe would progress into being better. But I don't know. I really hope he kicks on. I hope he becomes a player that
I'm really pleased he's decided to go to Serie A.
Yeah.
As opposed to going like the Championship, maybe like Millwall were being linked with him and stuff. And it's like, I actually think Serie A will suit Lewis as the kind of way he plays. I think the style of football in Italy will suit Lewis. I think the thing for me with Lewis Ferguson is I think he's got all the attributes to be a really, really, really good footballer. I think he probably reached a bit of a ceiling with what he could do with Aberdeen. Right. I think he needs to be developed further.
Define what he is.
Yeah. And going to Bologna, I think will do the world good. So, I'd like to see a bit more cash in the door for him, but it is what it is.
Right, so happier times, incomings. We love incomings, right? So I'll take a big deep breath for this one, right? So we've got Iba Ramdani, a 26-year-old German-born Albanian international midfielder. He joined from NTK Budapest for a reported £310,000. A young fullback, Jaden Richardson, was signed from EPL New Boys Nottingham Forest. He turned out 4 times for Forest last season and he cost £300,000. Bojan Mivoski, a 23-year-old North Macedonian international forward, signed also from MTK for around 350 grand. Anthony Stewart, which is an interesting one, was picked up for free from Wycombe Wanderers. The 29-year-old defender had played just under 300 games for Wycombe in 2 spells at the club, playing 33 times during the championship campaign in 2021 season. Dutch 30-year-old keeper Kelly Roos was picked up from Derby County on a free after playing 18 championship games for Wayne Rooney's relegated side last season. And finally, so far, Luis Lopez, known as Duke, was signed from Benfica B for around 400,000. The 22-year-old forward was born in Lisbon and has represented both Sporting and Benfica at youth levels in his hometown, as well as Portugal at under 18 and 19 level. But due to parentage, Duke has chosen to turn out for Cape Verde and made his debut last month in a friendly loss to Ecuador, where incidentally he also captained the side. Finally, the club loaned Irish defender Liam Scale from Celtic in June for a season-long period. Jim Goodwin is on record suggesting he would like to sign 3 or 4 more bodies. So from seeing some of the players already, how are you looking happy-wise in terms of signings?
In terms of signings, it's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
It's Aberdeen have never really decided to go down this very cosmopolitan route of signing players. So signing Macedonian internationals and Albanian internationals and Cape Verde internationals is exciting, but also you have that slight nagging bit in the back of your head going, remember Hearts under Romanov and how that worked out. I think the good thing for us is we touched on it earlier on. We entirely ripped up our entire footballing operation when Derek McInnes left, and Darren Mowbray, brother of Tony, is our head of recruitment now. He came in from Burnley. He joined up in September last season, so missed the kind of summer window. Clearly, we have adopted a much more internationalist outlook in terms of where we're trying to source players from. We've got a real heavy team now of data analysts and performance analysts within the recruitment team now.
Interesting.
So, and Dave Cormack has talked very heavily in the past about teams like, oh God, it's going totally out my head now. Is it Midgetland? Midgetland is sounds like a theme park.
Yep.
But and Nordstrand, I think it is.
Yeah, right. I know exactly. We played them last season. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
And I think Midgetland have got a link up with Brentford, I think, as well. Brentford have done this very well, kind of almost taking this very Moneyball approach to football recruitment. So looking much more in the data, looking to see who it is, try to work out what sort of player we want, looking at the data across the continent and further afield, and try to find players who maybe other people aren't necessarily looking at to meet that and see what we can do. And if the recruitment team can convince the board to part with some cash, then we're willing to make those investments in young up-and-coming players who I think we feel we can potentially bring in, have for a couple of seasons, then maybe look to sell on if they do well here. That's something we've clearly decided to go for this summer. It's a huge ask. I mean, like we talked about it earlier on, the amount of players who've left Aberdeen in the summer, the amount of players we've brought in, I think we've brought 7 in so far. Jim's still talking about how he wants another 3 or 4 in the door. So it's a huge turnover of players with not a particularly big summer period to try and get people to gel. All the different nationalities are coming in and everything as well. It's a big ask, but so far, the signs seem to be good. I mean, it's an interesting mix of players. I don't know if you want to go through them line by line, but on the whole, they all seem to be bringing something to the table.
What we'll do is we'll jump into the squad and you can educate me.
Okay.
It's interesting, right? So, rightly or wrongly, I hold Aberdeen up there in comparison to the majority of the rest of the league. Through doing this in my time, it's always interesting to see the 1 year deals. And Scottish football is very heavy for turnover of players. St Johnstone, Dundee, they'll sign a big wad of guys on 1 year contract. The following year, I mean, look at Ross County, their best players all leave on freeze. Give them a chance, they all leave on freeze. Whereas Aberdeen, they've got this influx of money from selling players recently. They've obviously got Dave Cormack's come in and he's trying to change things and stuff. So giving these guys 2 and 3 year contracts is risky as hell. But if you get it right with two of them, you're covering your arse, aren't you?
Exactly. Well, Majowski was given a 4 year deal to.
Exactly. Huge.
And Majowski's probably, I can't remember what number you quoted, but in reality, Majowski's fee was around 650, 700 grand.
Right. Jeez. Decent outlay.
But for Aberdeen, that's a big outlay.
Is Aberdeen's record still Paul Bernard for $1 million?
Yeah. It'll be Paul Bernard until the day I die. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Majowski was being touted around Europe for €1 million is what MTK wanted initially for him. I know that in January we were after a player from the Norwegian top flight, and we were willing to go. I believe we were willing to beat the Paul Bernard fee for him, and he ended up getting an offer from China and just went there instead. So
fair dues.
So I think that where the recruitment team identified players and we identified them in the right profiles, relatively young, with still potential to develop, I think we're willing to spend money if we feel we can flip them in 2 or 3 years. I mean, like Vicente Bajau came in January. He was on a 4 year deal as well. We paid 400 grand for him from ADO Den Haag.
Yeah.
So we've not been shy about spending some money this year, which again is kind of refreshing from an Aberdeen perspective.
Yeah. So the interesting thing for just looking at your squad, right? So the obvious guys come up. I'm led to believe Liam Scales has hit the ground running and he's looking I mean, I've seen a load of guys advocating signing him, and that's
he's been
really
terrible.
interesting.
He's been terrible.
He's been terrible. Aye.
Yeah.
Is that it?
You should sell us to him for
50 grand.
Yeah. Just give us to him.
And well, the lads love him. We've got a couple of Irish guys that do our podcast, and they've obviously, they know Shamrock Rover fans, and the Shamrock Rover fans were going, this guy's the best guy in the league by a stretch. And he's never got a chance with us. I've been somebody who's kind of thinking maybe the step was too much for him, but it's great for us that he goes to you guys, looks apart, and he either leaves and goes to you guys, strengthening you guys. But I hate the loan that he can't play against us. I think that's, if you don't rate him, then let him go and play football. No, don't fucking restrict the guy. But that's just me personally. So it'll be interesting. But I'm glad to see that he's doing well. The one that interests me, I've always been a fan of Joe Lewis. Now, to see Roos come in and take the jersey, and I'm led to believe Goodwin's, he's no into this rotation of goalkeepers that some people like. So it seems to be Joe Lewis's number 2 now. Is that right?
At this moment in time, yeah, because Roos started the game against Peterhead, the opening Premier Sports Cup game, and I think a lot of people thought, okay, he'll probably play Lewis against Dumbarton, then he'll play Roos against Stirling, and he'll play Lewis against Wraith, and then he'll make a decision who plays against Celtic. But Goodwin came out pretty much straight after the Peterhead game and said, like you just said there, he doesn't believe in rotating players or doesn't believe in having a cup goalkeeper or anything like that. So it would appear that for the time being, Roos has got the jersey, and Roos is the number 1 at the moment. It's a bold call by Goodwin, I'll be honest, because I felt that Joe, by his own admission, didn't have a great season last year. But towards the back end, he was really starting to look more like the kind of Joe Lewis of old. I kind of thought that they would keep Lewis in the sticks, but Roos was coming in to provide some proper competition and maybe just keep him on his toes. Now, whether that's what he's doing in the long term here, but he's just almost, giving him a warning by saying, well, the boy's here, I'm going to give him the run to start with and we'll see what happens. I don't know. Roos has had very little to do in the 4 games so far, so it's really hard to make a call about whether he's any good or not. Looks a wee bit suspect on crosses, but it's hard to tell at the moment whether he's any good or any better than Joe Lewis, to be honest with you.
So the guys that stand out, right? So I'll leave Ramirez to the end because I want to hear about this, right? So we spoke with David Bates. Now, David Bates was somebody, I love German football, eh? So when David Bates took the step to Hamburg, a team that I really dislike, I still kept an interest. And there was a point he was playing, and then he was out. No, none shall pass. You aren't playing for us anymore. You go and stand away in the corner. And he's obviously had a couple of loan spells down in England. I was surprised when Aberdeen signed him because I don't think he's particularly great. I'd like to hear your opinion on that. Matty Kennedy is somebody I've really enjoyed watching through St Johnstone. I think if on a great day, he is a great player, but he seemed very inconsistent. Johnny Hayes is Johnny Hayes. He's looked great in the games this season. Ross Mccrory looks like he's coming into himself. I've always been impressed with him. I think he's a good player. So talk about the guys and anybody else in the squad that you think's going to make that impact. And I'd like to hear about Connor Barron as well. So just you go for it.
So we'll go from the top then. David Bates. I mean, David Bates was signed, I think, as a pure panic at the back end of August because defensively, well, Andy Considine had that injury in Karabakh, in Baku, and so we were desperately short of defensive cover at that point, and we needed it. And obviously Andy was going to be out for the season, so we needed somebody brought in. We were still trying to persist with Ross Mccrory at centre half at this point as well. David Bates came in. I mean, I feel a bit sorry for David Bates from one perspective because, as you touched on there, he was completely bombed out at Hamburg. I think at one point he was playing with the youth team or playing with the youth team and stuff. So he arrived at Aberdeen having had no pre-season, having had very little in the way of any sort of football at all. And he was put straight in for a debut at Motherwell, I think it was. I think it was Motherwell. And he just, he clearly wasn't at it in terms of fitness. And this was also coinciding with the time where we were on that 6 or 7 or 8 game losing streak. So he's trying to get up to speed. The team's doing horrendous. We're shipping goals left, right, and centre. He's playing alongside Declan Gallagher, bless him. He's also being asked to play on the left-hand side of the two in the centre of the park, and he's not a left footer. And so it always looks awkward when he's getting the ball and he's trying to play passes. It just didn't really seem to work for him. Then suddenly we kind of got a bit of form and he picked up some fitness and he looked handy enough. And then again, the season just tailed off and he started to look really nervy all of a sudden again. David Bates is clearly a confidence player. He clearly needs to have a level of confidence in him to perform at his best level. I don't know how it goes for a lot of people, but I don't know. I can't make my mind up about David Bates. I can't decide if there's actually a player in there or not. I don't think we're ever going to find out at Aberdeen because I suspect he's going to be leaving this summer. So that's David Bates. Matt Kennedy is an interesting one. Kennedy also was signed by Derek McInnes using his classic scouting technique of signing people who do well against us in one-off games. Kennedy came in and I thought he looked okay to begin with. He kind of reminded me of a younger Johnny Hayes, a lot of pace, maybe not much of a trick about him, but he would just knock the ball past somebody and run past you. And that was what he did. So I kind of thought, okay, well, this might be the Johnny Hayes replacement we've been looking for since he left for you guys after the Scottish Cup final in 2017. And then Matty's just really suffered badly with injuries. He's never really hit the ground running with Aberdeen at all. He's come back looking, they talked about it in pre-season. It looks like him and the physios have done a lot of work to try and get to the bottom of what was the recurring issue. He seems to have come back looking fit, looking determined, looking ready to go. And he's had a good season so far. Scored a really good free kick against Stirling Albion the other night. Scored against Dumbarton. I mean, it's all lower league teams, so you have to put this stuff into context. But, for guys who've not really had that kind of level of confidence building before, this is all positive. So Matty Kennedy, I think it's a cliche, but could be like having a new signing this season. Certainly gives us a bit more flexibility in certain areas, and it's maybe meant we've had to shelve certain plans or ideas about maybe bringing in additional backup in those areas. Who else did you want to talk about? Ross Mccrory?
Ross Mccrory, yeah. He's looking great.
I mean, Ross, to me, has always looked like a bit of a Rolls Royce of a player. Just needs a bit of focus, bit of discipline around where his best position is, and leave him to try and develop in that area. He's started the season well. It's won back over those Aberdeen fans who had issues about where he chose to go in his summer holidays this season.
What was that?
He
Did
was
I miss
in,
this?
I think he might have been spotted in Seville for a few days.
Right, okay, yes, I did see that.
So, he's been given the vice captaincy. I think he's a player that Jim Goodwin really likes. I am hoping that he'll get the season to develop as a centre midfielder, which I think is probably his best position. And the early signs between him and Ramadani are good. They seem to be dovetailing very well. They seem to have developed a really good understanding already. And he seems to be adding some goals to his game now, Mccrory. He's got 3 already in the Premier Sports Cup. Great goal against Wraith Rovers on Sunday.
We'll talk about the games in a second, but if you get the chance, go and watch Aberdeen's game against Wraith Rovers, wasn't it? Was it Wraith Rovers who scored it?
Yeah.
And an absolute peach. And but as you say, he scored. I think he scored 3 out of 4 games.
Yeah, he scored against Dumbarton, and he scored against Stirling Albion as well. So yeah, these are what you want to see Ross doing. He's getting into more advanced positions, getting shots away, etc. So that's all good. Who else did you talk about? Oh, Connor Barron, or Connor Barrandor, as we nickname him out. This is a kid who has got every chance in the world of going on to be a really, really, really top.
Right. Interesting, because obviously we've been linked with him, and ignorant as hell, I've not seen anywhere near enough of him to cast any opinion. So talking for you, that's great to hear. I mean, there's a bit of me. I want Celtic to sign all the best young guys, but I want Celtic to sign all the best young guys and give them a chance. I can't be bothered with us basically just ruining people.
Yeah, and I think, if I'm brutally honest, I mean, I know that you guys have been linked with him. I think it'd be a terrible move right now for Connor Barron to even consider moving to Celtic at this stage of his career. It would strike me as being one of those classic situations where Rangers and Celtic decide to buy up good young players from elsewhere in the league and just stockpile them and not really give them an opportunity. Connor needs to spend, Connor's only played 6 months of first team football at Aberdeen. So again, a lot of this needs to be tempered down with it. The expectation levels need to be tempered down. But he's got every chance. He's a proper centre midfielder, can take the ball in the half turn, great eye for a pass. Jim Goodwin's been talking about potentially looking to play him a little bit further forward, potentially more like in a number 8 or number 10 role. I'm not entirely sure if I see that's where he'll play, but if you want comparisons, and I'm going to get slated for this, but fuck it, I don't care. Xavi.
You went right to the top there.
That's the kind of player you're looking at. That's the sort of mold he's in. He's very tidy with the ball at his feet, takes the ball in. He looks like he's got all the time in the world in a really hectic centre of the park, can pop passes off, finds little pockets of space. Scott Brown spent a lot of time, I think, working with Connor Barron last season. Because I think Connor was on loan at Kelty Hearts for the first part of last season. I think he was come back to Aberdeen to train during the week. And I understand that Scott spent a lot of time with Connor, talking through certain things with him. He's got every chance in the world of going to the very top, but he needs to play games, needs to play games at the top level, needs to make the right move when it comes for him. But for me, the best place for Connor Barron right now is to play at his hometown team in Aberdeen.
That's great. That's exactly what I'm looking for all of them. I mean, I don't think we need to sit and talk with Johnny Hayes. We know what Johnny Hayes is all about. Tell me about the Ramirez thing. Let's get into the Ramirez, right? Ramirez has got that, do you know what I mean? He's got that sexy name. He's come in a kind of blaze of glory kind of thing. He looks like a good player. He's scored some goals this season, but we've got that thing where you're struggling at the bottom end of the league. The Premiership playoff thing is creeping closer, and you let him go on holiday for the last couple of games of the season. What's the script?
Yeah, I mean, so Ramirez obviously comes in last summer, very much a Stephen Glass signing, comes in from the MLS. He was with Houston Dynamo at the time. He'd played with LAFC before that, and his most successful spell in the States had been with Minnesota United before that. Came in, clearly, like I say, a Stephen Glass signing, someone that Stephen knew well. I think there was a chat at the time that Stephen had actually tried to sign him for Atlanta when Stephen was the interim manager at Atlanta United as well. So they clearly had an element of a relationship there. Like you say, he comes in, starts well, scores in his debut against BK Häcken, scores in his first Premiership match against Dundee United, really hits the ground running. Things are looking pretty positive. And then Stephen Glass gets sacked. And I've never seen a player before react to the sacking of a manager in the way that Ramirez did, because the first thing that happened was he took to social media and posted like the angry face emoji with just the word fuck, right? So
I never knew this.
I've never really seen that before. And you go, okay, well, clearly, he has a relationship with the manager and all that. And you're like, all right, but these things also happen, Christian. Sometimes managers get sacked and it's what it is. And then I kind of have to be careful with what I say about the Ramirez thing, to be honest with you. It's clear that Jim Goodwin and Christian Ramirez probably don't necessarily see eye to eye in their philosophies on how the game of football should be played. There's been some interesting chat. Ramirez did a podcast back in the States with some guys, which was raised some eyebrows, I think, a lot of people, because it was talking about the differences in culture between like the US and Scotland in terms of like football. And he was talking about how, there was a game I scored like a last minute equalizer in, and I got into the dressing room thinking everyone would be like, yeah, well done. And like everyone was just fucking raging. And he couldn't understand why this was. And then when you went back and looked, I was like, oh, I wonder what game that was. So I went back and looked. It was that Ross County game. We drew 1-1 at home when Ross County Ramirez scored last minute. And I'm like, well, yeah, I can understand why people in the dressing room were not happy, because a draw at home against Ross County is not helping us get to where we want to get to. So you kind of like, okay, I understand there's this naivety, I think, about expectations and all that. And that's not necessarily on the player. I mean, I think that sometimes the club has an obligation to educate guys coming in the door about, look,
this is the expectations.
It's expected you'll beat Ross County at home. It's, don't go around praising teams who play in blue on social media, base level stuff, So there was that. Ramirez was our only striker option we had last season. He was the only guy we had who could play up top. So there was definitely an element of him looking burnt out, looking knackered by the time we got to kind of March time, which just coincided with the time that Goodwin comes in. But it does look to me a little bit like, was Ramirez really playing for Goodwin? I'm not entirely sure he necessarily was. Yeah. This all then culminates in, we played Hibs away, third last game of the season, I think it was. No, yeah, third last game of the season. Is that right? Yeah. I think it was 1-1 at Easter Road on the Saturday. On the Monday, we got a tip-off from somebody that Ramirez was on a flight from Aberdeen to Amsterdam first thing in the morning, like the 6 o'clock red eye. He was way back to the States. The official line from the club is that Jim Goodwin and co decided that they would give him an extended summer holiday because he'd played a lot of football and he hadn't had any break since God knows when. And it was important that he went home and had an extended summer break, and he would come back refreshed and ready for the season to go. It's the official line from the club. I'm not going to say anything about
that. No buying it. Nah, no buying it. I think it's done.
I'm not entirely convinced that that's the order in which that happened, but never mind. So he misses the last two games of the season, and even if you take the club's official word at it, if you take that at face value, personally speaking, I don't think that's a good look to.
No.
Even if I'm a player in a team that's not performing well, and my manager comes to me and says, "Do you want to take 2 weeks off early?"
It sounds ridiculous.
Like, even my own professional pride would make me say, no, I'm going to stay and stick this out for the last 2 weeks, along with my teammates. And we'll get to the end of the season, then I'll go on my holidays and we'll deal with all that. Okay, fine. It was literally 1 more week, I think, he had to play. So I don't think that helped. I think that's left a bad taste in a lot of Aberdeen fans' mouths, to be honest with you. I think a lot of people buy the official club line on this one as well. So fine, fair dues, if that's what you want to do. Ramirez came back late for pre-season training, but apparently that had all been agreed as well. Came back. I think, to be honest, maybe that had been agreed. I might be being very cynical on that one.
Cynical,
comes back in and has started the majority of the games so far in the Premier Sports Cup, but that's because our new signing, Bojan Miovski, was still struggling with visa issues to get him here. And he scores against Peterhead. Did he score 2 against Peterhead?
Peterhead,
yes, he did. Scored against 2 against Peterhead. Didn't score against Dumbarton. Scored against Stirling Albion, and then obviously was on the bench against Raith Rovers. So has come in as scored 3 goals, and you think, okay, well, maybe and there's kind of signs there that, you know, maybe he's looking quite positive and looking quite sharp and, you know, looking quite happy to be here and all that kind of good stuff. So maybe we do have a refreshed striker ready to get going. And then yesterday happens. So Miovski comes in to the city on Friday, finally gets his visa sorted out. Miovski goes straight into the starting lineup against Raith Rovers yesterday. And just to top things off, Miovski's been given the number 9 jersey, which Ramirez has had, even in the opening 3 games this season. And Ramirez has been given 99 now. And Ramirez's brothers on social media last night saying this is disrespectful and taking his number off and telling Aberdeen fans that, you know, Goodwin's in the press saying that him and Miovski and Ramirez agreed about this, and his brothers saying, no, they didn't. They're trying to force him out the door and all this stuff. So it's just got so messy. Like the advice I would give to Christian Ramirez and his family, if they want to listen to me, is stay off social media.
Just keep it by.
Stop posting stuff. Like, his wife, bless her, posted this like thing a few months ago about how like living in Aberdeen was really difficult, which, don't get me wrong, I'm sure it was like really hard to move to a new city from Houston and LA, especially to like Aberdeen. Okay, I get it. And in the depths of winter, it's not quite the same.
No, it's a bit grim.
The tone of the message was, the tone of the post was a bit like she'd moved to like some sort of like war zone, and it's like, you know, like a bit of perspective is sometimes useful. So I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be very surprised if Ramirez is still here come the end of the summer transfer window. But I'm not entirely sure who in the MLS will be looking to buy him. He's on a not insignificant wage, and his goal scoring record at Aberdeen last season was fine. I don't think there's any question marks about that. But I mean, the MLS window opened up on the 17th of July, I think it was. And there's not been any interest as far as I'm aware so far. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens. He's under contract here for the rest of the season. I don't suspect Goodwin will want to have.
When I was pulling my information together, it was interesting that the attacking options that you guys have brought in this summer. Obviously, it's explained when Ramirez is kind of your main striker last season and he's the only guy there. But I mean, the guys you brought in, so that gives us a good segue to move on to the groups. So because of last season's collapse, Aberdeen now have to contend with the Premier Sports Cup group stages.
Depressing.
So the team were drawn with Peterhead, Dumbarton, Stirling Albion and Raith Rovers, last season's victors. A 2-0 win, away win over Peterhead, Ramirez with 2 second-half goals that we're talking about, was followed by another 2-0 win, this time at home to Dumbarton. Mccrory and Kennedy, the scorers. An away win, an away tie with Stirling Albion. Well, that was done in the first half, 5-0. First half goal, 2 goals by Beswin, Ramirez scoring, Kennedy scoring, and Mccrory scoring. And then you finished off the group to top it with a perfect record, not even conceding a goal, with a 3-0 win over that same Raith Rovers who put you out last season, when Miovski scoring a penalty, Mccrory with that absolute screamer, and Johnny Hayes with a good goal as well. Very comfortable. For the highlights I've watched, very, very comfortable However, again, I'll be honest, I hold Aberdeen there. That group should be comfortable. You know what I mean? And because you've topped that, you've now got yourself an away tie on the 30th or 31st of August against an Athletic.
I know somebody must have heated the wrong ball up yesterday.
So have you been to the games then? Have you been to all the games? Have you been to a few of the games?
I've been to the 2 home games.
Right.
I've watched both the away games. So we started off a wee bit sluggish against Peterhead. Job done, 2-0, fine, move on. Dumbarton, we played well in stages again, still looking a little bit, just starting to find our feet. Stirling Albion, first half was excellent, really, really good performance. And then against Wraith yesterday, got off to a good start. We got a little bit sloppy for 15 or 20 minutes, and then we kind of started to take control of the game again. So, you're right. I mean, when the group came out, you looked at it and I thought, that's about as, I can't believe I'm even saying this, but the group stage is the Premier Sports Cup. But it was, if we could have handpicked a group, that probably would have been there or thereabouts what you'd have gone for. I think you had a Peterhead team who were really, really struggling with players. You had a Dumbarton side who've been relegated again into League Two now. You had Stirling Albion, a League Two side, and then you had Wraith, who kind of faltered a little bit towards the back end of last season. Plus, it gave us a chance to exercise the ghosts from the season before. So, we avoided the likes of, upstart, confident teams like Cove, like Kelty, like, sides like this. Even like, we couldn't have got Dundee because they also got relegated. But, we avoided some of the more tricky fixtures that could have been out there for us. So that was good. You expect us to come through that group comfortably. We've done it. 12 points out of 12, 12 goals scored, no goals conceded, which is big because our defence last season was horrendous. So it's all pointing in the right sort of direction for us from that perspective. But you have to put a lot of this into context just about the team as you're playing. But I would say, we were having this discussion when we recorded our podcast last night that will go out this week, that in a way, we didn't want to be in the group stages of the League Cup. Of course, we'd rather be in Europe. But with the kind of changes we've had to go through this season, with the level of turnover of players we're going through, trying to build a new team, try to build that team spirit, it's maybe not been the worst thing in the world for us to have done this. And it's potentially setting us up in good shape for the weeks ahead. I mean, obviously, we play you guys on Sunday. You guys haven't had a competitive game in your legs yet because you're straight into the Champions League group stages, of course, this season. So does that give us an opportunity possibly to try and catch you guys a little bit cold? Who knows? We'll come on the game on Sunday in a minute or two. It's been beneficial, I think, for us to have come this way. And then, we've lucked out now by being seeded. We've drawn the lowest ranked team left in the competition in Annan. That opens a door to the quarterfinals. And we talked about this again in the pod last night. If you look at the way that the round of 16 draws opened up, there are going to be, one of, I can't remember off the top of my head now, but there'll be Partick Thistle or Arbroath. One of them will be in the quarterfinals. There will be Dundee or Falkirk. One of those two will be there. There'll be one of the way the draw is shaken out. If you get fortunate again with a quarterfinal draw, you could be looking, semi-finals pretty rapidly, and from there, who knows what happens? And the season takes on a very different slant on it once you start progressing in the League Cup. So, for us, it's been a good start to the season. No more than that. We need to see how we start going when the real meaty fixtures start.
I mean, Saturday's an outliner for both of us, I think. What I did mention earlier on, from looking at your games last season for doing this pod, like I said, you seem to have lots of the ball, but once you got into the second half, he's either never created many chances or it was too much passing around goal, too much passing, and there was nothing. Whereas these games I've watched, and again, we've got to put in the context the weakness of the opposition, but you guys look more from middle to front, you look rapid, and it looks like you're punishing teams. And I think that's interesting for this season because we play the game so high up. Now, with any pace in behind, I mean, there is lots of space to be had. I mean, we're already pushed into it, kind of. But there's my worry. From looking at the games, I think the pace that you've injected into the team could cause us a lot of problems. That's just me.
I think Goodwin was really, he made a big deal about that in the end of last season and into this season about how, we want to bring the average age of the team down completely. It was way too high last season. We've injected a lot of energy into our team now, which we needed. It's key, again, context is everything because of the teams we've been playing, but we've been moving the ball through the lines way quicker than we were last season. We're not doing these pointless side to side to side to side to side to side passing where we're incrementally gaining about a yard every fucking time we do it.
Yeah.
We're absolutely looking to break lines with accurate passes from even the centre half areas. Liam Scales has been key at that for us so far. Some of the passes he's been threading through inside left channels and stuff have been really impressive. Gives us a lot of different options, I think, about how we can attack teams this season. I think the last few seasons we've been under McInnes, we were easy to defend against once teams sussed us out because the game plan was get the ball wide to Mcgee or Hayes, fling the ball into the box. That's how we played. Against Glass, it was trying to do everything through the middle of the park, so teams just got really compact in the centre of the park, stopped us doing that. Very easy to defend against. This season, I feel like we've got lots of options. We can come through the middle of the park, but we can also stick the ball out wide. You've got Johnny Hayes looks like a player reborn in pre-season. I don't know what's happened to him, but I'm here every day of the week for that. You've got Matt Kennedy with pace. Vicente Bashowin's got a bit of pace about him. Miofsky's not a slouch. Duke, our new Cape Verdean international, he's pretty rapid as well. He's a bit rough around the edges, but he's pretty rapid. Jaden Richardson, the right back we brought in, very, very quick.
Right.
Maybe a bit suspect defensively, potentially. It's hard to tell. He's not been tested too much, but we've certainly got options all over the park now about how we can play. Ramadani and Mccrory are certainly making an impression in the centre of the park, looking to move the ball forward at every opportunity as well. And one of them is always looking to drive forward as well. So you've always got that kind of third or fourth runner coming from the midfield area now as well from us. So we look impressive, I think. But I need to couch that with just I want to see how we do against better teams.
Right, so let's go on to Sunday then, right? So you've gave me exactly what I'm wanting in terms of the squad wise and what your opinions of the season so far. Now, with that in mind, coming to Celtic Park, right? So 4:30 on a fucking Sunday for our opening game of the season, absolutely delightful, right? Now it's pretty shit for us, but it's pretty crap for you guys having a Sunday night down to Glasgow. But alas, so we touched on it last season. 3 games, albeit touch and go. 3 defeats last season. Now, the team's been overhauled quite a bit, as we've just discussed. How do you think Goodwin's going to set up? Bearing in mind Goodwin's past with St Mirren, I suppose allows you to cast thoughts on how he's going to set up. But do you expect this a free hit? Let's just fucking give it a right good go. Let's try and punish that space that I was talking about.
Well, as long as Jim remembers not to take his green and white scarf to the game, that'll be a good start. Listen, in all seriousness, I mean, this is it's interesting. We spoke about this again last night on our pod. One of the real positives about Stephen Glass was the way that we played against Celtic and Rangers last season, in particular away from home. It's the first time in a long time I've seen us actually go to Ibrox and to Celtic Park and actually try to take the game to both teams. We didn't necessarily do that so much at Celtic Park. I felt we were more on the back foot, but we felt we were willing to take the ball and try and play our way out of trouble rather than just smash the ball at the park and reset and hope for the best. The 2-2 draw at Ibrox was probably our finest performance of the season. We were excellent that night and we played really, really well. So that was a really encouraging thing about Stephen Glass's approach was there was no fear about who we were playing. We were just going to keep playing the way we wanted to play. Now, you just touched on Jim Goodwin. Obviously, Goodwin's come up through the system playing with like St Mirren and everything, where if you go to Parkhead or you go to Ibrox and you get a draw, that's a fantastic result. And it will be interesting to see if he decides to try and set up that way at like Ibrox and Celtic Park this season. For me, I mean, I look at Sunday in particular, I look at it as a bit of a free hit because it's first game of the season. We are down a player already before we even start because Liam Scales is unavailable, which is one of the key reasons why I am against this idea about loaning players from, not just from Celtic, but from any other team in our league who we can't use. It's either that or the league needs to do away with this rule about they can't play against their parent club. Because as far as I recall, in the Champions League, you could play against your parent club if you're on loan. So why not do it here? Anyway, that's a big issue for us. It'll probably mean Ross Mccrory will drop it. Based on what we've seen now, he'll drop Ross Mccrory into centre-half alongside Anthony Stewart. And that'll mean probably Dante Polvara will play in centre midfield alongside Ilba Ramadani on Sunday because Connor Barron's injured. He won't be back in time for this one. So that's how I suspect we'll line up from that perspective. I think he's got to take it like a free hit. I mean, we spoke about it earlier on. Again, context is everything. We've got 4 competitive games in our legs now. We've had a good pre-season. We're coming up against a Celtic team who've had good pre-season, have played plenty of friendly matches, but haven't had that competitive edge in any game yet this season. So do you hope to catch Celtic a little bit cold from that perspective? That's, I think, where we need to try and get to and go for it. I was impressed, Bojan Miovski, in his post-match interview yesterday. Again, words are just words, and we'll see what happens come Sunday, but he was pretty adamant, we're coming to Celtic Park to win. That's what we want to do. I'm impressed with that attitude. I hope that's what we try to do on Sunday.
So, okay, fling it down to you. What's your prediction?
I said last night in our pod it'd be 2-0 Aberdeen. We're going to really
okay, fucking hell.
But I might have to. I'll catch myself a little bit further and say it'll be a 1-1 draw.
Right, okay. So with that in mind, tell me, what is your hopes for the season? And what's your kind of hopes for the club this season, especially after last season's kind of dismal? I mean, to go right back to the beginning, you were talking about how the club's now set up different. I like that setup, and I agree with you. If you're putting in a director of football, you generally want to put him in first and then the coach after. So it kind of works that way, and you're giving him the autonomy that he's the main guy. However, I'm very interested to see how it goes with Aberdeen. To fling out one of the wanky phrases, a good strong Aberdeen is good for the league. Right? I don't say that. It is patronising. I don't mean it to be patronising. I want Aberdeen to be strong. I think when you go to Pittodrie and you get a right hard game, it gives you a dictator of a season, because winning at Pittodrie is brilliant. I mean, I love going to Pittodrie. Pittodrie is one of my favourite trips, and I just want to know your hopes, but your thoughts on where it's going to go. Obviously, you've not got a crystal ball.
Hopes for the season, the treble, obviously, because at the end of the day, if you don't enter these competitions to win them, why are you doing it? I saw that Joe Savage, the Hearts managing director, or sporting director, was getting a lot of stick for him coming out saying that Hearts were starting the season aiming to win the league, and I was like, why is he getting stick for that? I want to hear more people say that. I think
the one thing that goes against him is he says, yeah, we want to win the league. I mean, we probably won't. I think we won't, and I'm not saying we will, but we're aiming to do that. And like you said, see, we just finished with, we're here to win the league. I'm fine. Mark Strachan, a Hibs fan I speak to, he's my contact for Hibs. He says, I start every season expecting my team to win the league. And I go,
I don't expect us to win the league. I don't expect this, but I mean, in all seriousness, from a footballing budget perspective, which is really boring to talk about, but we should be finishing in 3rd or 4th place. I would imagine this season. I suspect Hearts' football budget might be slightly higher than ours this season, just because of their prize money they got in last season and the money they'll be expected to bring in from Europe this year. So 3rd or 4th would be where I would think we should finish. I'd like to finish bare minimum 3rd, absolutely get ourselves back into Europe, and I'd like to win the Scottish Cup. It's been too long since the Scottish Cup's been back in the northeast of Scotland. As a child of the 80s, the Scottish Cup used to reside permanently in the northeast of Scotland, so it's been too long. I think it'll be 33 years if we win it in May next year, so that's been too long. So that's nearly get to Hibs territory. So
always like the wee digs at Hibs.
I'll have a dig at any team in Scotland. It's fine. So yeah, I think hopes the treble. Realistically, 3rd or 4th would be an acceptable season, as long as that is followed up with a trophy in the cabinet as well, and preferably that'd be the Scottish Cup. But I'll take a cup double as well. Fuck it.
All right, why not? Why not? Right, outstanding. Thank you very much, sir, for taking your time out today. And obviously my technical know-how where I have to stop and start and stuff like that. But once again, thanks for your patience, thanks for your time, thanks for your information. It's been excellent. But before we go, sell yourself. Now, you've got your podcast. Tell people where they can find your podcast, and where are you in social media?
Yeah, so if any Celtic fans out there actually decide they'd like to hear 3 Aberdeen fans talk absolute nonsense for 2 or 3 hours a week, you can find us, all of our links. You'll find us on any of your usual streaming platforms, Spotify, etc. Just look up ABZ Football Podcast. If you go to our link tree, it's link.tr, is that right? Or linktr.ee/ABZ Football Podcast. You'll find all the links in there. On social media, we're on Twitter at ABZ Podcast. I've got no idea what our Facebook handle is, but I'm sure if you look for ABZ Football Podcast, you'll find us there. Thanks again, Scott. Appreciate being on.
Mate, that was brilliant. And hopefully we can tie up later on in the season. We'll have another good wee review at it. All right, mate?
Sounds good to me. Nice one.
You're a gentleman. Thanks, pal. Speak to you soon.
Take care. Cheers.